Open Access, Creative Ways of Sharing Research Stories, presented by Emma Burns with Dr. Nancy Salmon. Presented at the Nordic Network on Disability Research Biannual Conference in Bergen, Norway, May 6th to the 8th, 2015, in collaboration with Marie Curie Actions and the Department of Clinical Therapies, University of Limerick, Ireland. Aim: using the stories of people with intellectual disabilities transitioning into the community, a stop-motion video was created to show how such tools can be used to produce accessible research outputs. Moving Home is an international case study looking at the experiences of people with intellectual disabilities in the Republic of Ireland, Nova Scotia and Canada, and in Northern Ireland. To make the stop-motion animation, we looked at the first-person accounts. These were up to 15 interviews with self-advocates at each site. In each case, these people told us their stories. We summarised these stories and turned them into the narratives which we can see in the stop-motion animation. Why did we do this? There are many ways to tell life stories. Researchers often use writing, but many people do not read. Using video and images instead of writing is an exciting way to share research stories. Creating accessible research outputs is supported by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The preamble to the UN CRPD recognises the importance of accessibility in enabling persons with disabilities to fully enjoy all human rights and fundamental freedoms. Article 3 discusses accessibility generally. Article 4 focuses on universal design, including new technologies such as information and communications technologies. Article 9 relates to access on an equal basis with others to information and communications, as well as to the promotion of accessible technologies so that they become accessible at no extra cost. Cost is also mentioned in Article 21, emphasising that people with disabilities should have to bear no extra cost to access information and communications. Private entities that provide services to the general public, including through the internet, are urged to provide information and services in accessible and usable formats for persons with disabilities. Guided by these principles, we attempt to create accessible research outputs that will be accessible at no extra cost to people with intellectual disabilities. This slide demonstrates the research process. First, deciding on a research question and design, ethics approval and recruiting people, gathering stories, finding answers, and telling people what we learned. It is this last piece that the Open Access project is focused on. The research team was made up of self-advocates, students and researchers. The self-advocates had previous experience of working on inclusive research projects. The students were co-op placement students. All undergraduate students at the University of Limerick are required to complete 6 months of work experience as part of their degree programme. We had 2 cohorts of students working with us on this animation. Development. The team collaborated over 6 months to develop an animation which connects and contrasts the experience of people with intellectual disabilities as they move into community living. Production took a further 6 months to complete a full edit of the animation. A team of 1 student and 1 research participant, supported by the researchers, took 2 months to make a short graphic novel. First, we'll look at the process for producing the graphic novel. The interviews with 1 participant were taken and summarised. The storyline was developed and a storyboard sketched out by a co-op student. The first draft was presented to the participant, who reviewed it and suggested changes to the storyline. The draft was revised and captions were added. There was a second revision by the participant, who suggested changes to the wording of the captions. A final version was completed. The next 4 slides show 1 chapter of the graphic novel. This is Andrew's story. It was drawn by student Seamus Harris. The words were written by Seamus and Andrew. The story is told in a comic 4 pages long. There are 16 panels in total. The first panel shows a red car driving through the countryside. The caption reads, "When Andrew was 6 and his friends started school, he went to live in an institution far away." The next panel shows a large grey religious institution followed by a picture of a priest walking down a long corridor with lots of doors. The caption reads, "There were no schools for people with disabilities close to Andrew's home." The last panel on the first page shows Andrew sitting in his family home, wearing a Christmas jumper and opening a present. The caption reads, "His family came to visit him once a month. He went home for the holidays." Page 2 of Andrew's story is made up of 6 panels. In the first panel, we see Andrew again. He has grown into a young man. He is walking through the door of a house, carrying 2 suitcases. The caption reads, "At 18, Andrew left the institution and moved into a house with 5 others. It was still a long way from home." The next panel shows an old man sitting up in a bed, followed by a picture of a small house in the countryside. The caption reads, "Within a year, Andrew's dad became ill. Andrew moved back home." The next panel shows a bus driving through the countryside, followed by a picture of Andrew working in a large kitchen. The caption reads, "Andrew got a job without pay with a service organisation. He spent 2 hours a day on the bus to get to the service." The last panel on page 2 shows Andrew sitting on a sofa with his hands behind his head. He is watching TV. The caption reads, "He spent his free time watching TV. He didn't have contact with many people." Page 3 of Andrew's story is made up of 4 panels. The first panel shows Andrew shaking hands with a man while a woman stands nearby. There are 2 captions. They read, "After a few years, Andrew's service moved to a local town. Andrew didn't have to travel so far anymore. He made new friends. Later, his friends told him about chances to move to a house of his own." In the second panel, Andrew is sitting in front of his parents. They have their arms folded and look unhappy. The caption reads, "At the start, Andrew's parents weren't happy about the idea of a move." In the third panel, Andrew is talking with his brother. The caption reads, "Andrew's older brother supported his plans." In the last panel on page 3, Andrew is sitting at a table with his brother and another man. They are talking. The caption reads, "A short time later, Andrew, his brother and a key worker started talking about Andrew moving to a house of his own." There are 2 panels on the last page of Andrew's story. The first shows Andrew walking a dog outside his own house. He is waving to his neighbour. His neighbour is waving back. The caption reads, "Within 2 months, Andrew had moved into a house he had chosen. He shares a dog with his neighbour and takes part in village events." The final panel in Andrew's story shows Andrew playing pool with his friends in the local pub. They're having fun. The last caption has Andrew's own words. "Now my pool buddies call in for me. They visit me. I have friends here now." Now we'll move on to looking at how we created the movie. In January 2014, the idea came as Nancy watched her niece make a stop-motion movie for a school project. In February, the research team mapped out individual stories from people in Ireland. The team designed a map that included all the stories in one picture. March to May 2014. The team designed the background scene for the stop motion, which would include all of the different types of housing that people had lived in. We then hosted a meeting at UL with self-advocates to inform the design. We then went on to produce the background for the animation using scrap paper, material and lots of glue. We held a second workshop with self-advocates to refine the final design. June to August. We bought an Android tablet, downloaded free apps for stop motion and for taking images by clapping. We hosted another workshop at UL, this time to design and select the characters. The first picture on this slide shows some of the characters we designed which were sadly rejected. The second picture shows the full cast. These characters were made from soft modelling clay so that they could be animated in the stop motion. Each one has an individual characteristic. June to August continued. We created Excel spreadsheets showing each year of a life story as one block in the table. We started taking photos and editing it into a movie format. We finished Andrew's story. We showed a premiere of Andrew's story at UL for a group of self-advocates. They gave us feedback and advised the following. First of all, Andrew needs driving lessons. We needed to use livelier music, and we should keep the words in the middle of the screen instead of scrolling up. From September to December, we finished shooting the stop motion. From January to March, we recorded the audio with the self-advocates. We then did the post-production editing and posted the movie on YouTube and the WordPress site. The graphic novel and animation are both available on nancysalmon.wordpress.com. This is a list of the technology and materials that we used. An Android tablet with camera and built-in voice recorder, Claymation app, YouTube editor, Windows Movie Maker, craft and scrap paper, and soft modelling clay. What we learned. The benefits of this process. The visual depictions deepen the analysis. It helped us to visualise the connections and disjunctures in the stories of the participants. Volunteers acquired social capital through the development of their technical skills and group work in an inclusive interdisciplinary team. Self-advocates contributed to the design and storylines and influenced the final shape of the movie. And finally, the movie elicited storytelling from the audience. Self-advocates were encouraged to tell of their own experiences of life in institutions, of moving to community living, and of their hopes for the future. We also experienced some complexities during the process, particularly around the timeline. The predicted 2 months became a 12-month reality. Improvising with non-standard equipment delayed the process as we tested, then rejected different production methods. It also proved challenging to manage a team of novice volunteers with no pre-existing knowledge of working on this type of project. The pilot animation of Andrew's story had been received so enthusiastically by our audience that we fully committed to depicting all the participants' stories to this format, rather than limiting the work to the time available. We came up with some suggestions to improve the process. Firstly, look for a diverse skill set in volunteers. It would be interesting to establish links with other institutions which run visual arts programmes. Turning to the process itself, our animation is a 10-minute story in which all the self-advocate stories intersect. It would have been easier to manage if each story had been shot separately as a discrete piece. From this, we have the following suggestions. Use short, catchy storylines of 30 seconds to 2 minutes long, similar to TV advertisements. Create chapters of a visual book rather than one long narrative. Agree a practical plan and timeline with the team. And finally, be willing to use an exit strategy. Any questions or suggestions about the Moving Home project can be sent to nancy.salmon@ul.ie or emma.burns@ul.ie. All the resources are available to view on Nancy's blog, nancysalmon, all one word, .wordpress.com. Thank you for listening.